So a lot of new faces. I lost almost my whole first crowd. You stayed! Yay! So I'll give you a quick introduction again and tell you exactly what we're going to get into. So first of all, this is my book called The Comedy Code. It's brilliant. Buy it. It's available on Amazon, Target, Walmart, Book Soup, Powell's Books, and booksellers everywhere. I'm the founder and owner of Actors Comedy Studio. I'm originally from California, and I grew up in Los Angeles, studying sketch and comedy at the Groundlings first. I am still currently represented.
I've taken a couple of their classes there before.
Awesome. They're very good friends of mine. I teach there annually as at a guest fundraising event. So I still have a great relationship with them. So I'll just do a quick, brief recap of just the bio, because I think having the context for where I'm coming from helps, because it's not about being right or wrong. There's different ways of study, different fields of study. But what I can say for myself in the book that I wrote and the words that I put down and committed to are from my experience living and working in Los Angeles and the system of writing, acting, and auditioning and casting actors through the actual system of Hollywood. So it gives me a perspective of industry standards and a shared standard of intent. So in other words, I've been fortunate enough to have a glimpse to see how the industry actually functions and operates, learn why actors get cast through the audition process and others don't, but also learn on the writing and content creation side why some things get made and why some don't. And it has a lot to do with things that you don't necessarily think of first, like specificity, and not just necessarily uniqueness of idea, but just taking even a basic idea and making it really, really great. So the last presentation I did was about the heroes of comedy, and it was about the specific archetypes and point of view and language that you can create in creating characters to tell a better story. A lot of people have a good idea for a story in a nutshell, but if you tell it with all 5 of your lead characters being interchangeable, the story might still be good, but it's not going to be as good as it can be if you follow, if that makes sense. So this presentation is more toward writing, and granted TV comedy, and I understand we're at a film festival, but I think we all live in a world now where we all know that it's about the streaming, and they make TV and TV series and movies alike, and there's kind of an intersection of short series. You know, sometimes I watch TV series and it feels more like a movie. So I think they're not entirely merging. There is still uniquely a film and uniquely a television show, but we have like these anthology series, etc. You all know what I'm talking about, and you know, we watch things on on the platforms that aren't necessarily a traditional length anymore. It's not just like exactly 30 minutes, and so on and so forth. So a lot of what I'm going to say does apply to TV, but we had a discussion about one of the primary differences between writing for TV and film, and I'll just reiterate that again really quickly and maybe make some other points along the way throughout the PowerPoint presentation that I made about the distinctions between TV and film. But when it comes to story and character and a lot of the tenets that I'm talking about, I think it's the foundation underneath anything that you would want to broadcast. But in short, I think the primary difference between creating a TV show and creating a film is that if you're creating a movie, you should have the end in sight. You need to know how it ends. I mean, there's always sequels and part 2 and part 3, but let's just table that for a moment. The idea is you've got 90 to 120 pages if it's long, and you want to send your hero on a journey, overcome obstacles, have an epiphany about and a review of what they've experienced, and become a different person or have a different perspective on life wholly. It's a brief and broad definition, but that's kind of the mission statement of a screenwriting course, and help it teaching you to write a film. TV shows, on the other hand, your characters are evergreen. You want them to be distinct in the ways that I talked about in, the last conversation. You want your neurotic to be the neurotic, your anchor to be the anchor, your sexy player to be the sexy player in every episode, and you don't ever want to change that, and you want to write into it hard in TV, even more than films. And it's one of the reasons we like sitcoms and TV comedy so much, is because they're reliable. They become comfortable, right? It doesn't matter which ones you like. We all have different tastes, but probably everybody here has a favorite comedy or favorite sitcom. Do you? Okay, yeah, everybody knows. All four of you literally made the same face. I'm going to beat it to you. You all went, sure, I'll buy what the guy's selling so far. But they feel good because we know what to expect. And we know the characters aren't going to change on us. And so maybe these days with streaming, I don't know if we'll see series that live to be 9 or 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 years old. But it wasn't that long ago that we had those. It wasn't crazy. Big Bang Theory's been off the air for a few years, but it only ended a few years ago, and it was 14 years old when it ended. See? Shocking. Modern Family is a show that even probably my younger friends know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How long was it on? Do you remember?
A long time.
It was like 12 or 13, something like. It was more than 10.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, are we gonna see 10 years of Euphoria? Thank you for the response. You all didn't see her face, but it if I read it right, it was like, I hope not. It'd get weird, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way the world of broadcast works, TV, film, whatever. Some things aren't designed to be looked at years after year, year after year, but family and friend and workplace sitcoms, which they still make, those can still maybe go on for a long time. Okay, so that's a little preface. Let's get into it. Let's see what I have here. So to me, creating a successful product, a piece of content, I like it's heavy lifting in the beginning. It's a big critical thinking exercise. I said this in the last talk, and I'll say it again. You don't need to be an artist, a creator. You don't need training to have a great idea. I mean, we're humans. We have imaginations, There's people all over the country, all over the world who has a good idea. The training is so that you understand the structure and how to translate the idea into a piece of commercial product that people want to buy from you and then not only broadcast, but spend more money advertising so people will watch it. So sorry to lay a big, huge business reality on you. But that's why we also have to study, and what I've worked really hard to do is study the success of the product that we've had throughout history. Because I want to look, and did look, in order to write the book, at what worked and why it worked. And I did my best to reverse engineer and go, well, why is Friends so beloved? I don't care what anybody's opinion or taste is. It's beloved. That's a fact. We can't argue it. So why? And a lot of these, TV shows, movies, they have little hidden secrets underneath. It's not just that they're good or bad. They explore themes and realities that are relatable to us. And really, really good product, TV and movie, really knows what it's doing. It aims at an audience. It has a target it wants to hit. So we can have the best of both worlds if we're smart and you know in advance that you can be strategic and creative at the same time and up the odds of your product, your content becoming more successful. And it doesn't matter whether it's on TikTok or on a movie screen or anything in between. Who's going to care about it? And why are they going to care about it? So if you add that into just the purely creative process, your odds go up. But let's talk about decisions and design. So this is just an overview. Actually, I have a slide for each one of these. So concept, what is your concept? When it comes to TV, I'm going to talk about single cam versus multicam. Another decision to make up front is whether you want it episodic or serialized. Tone, which we talked about in the last conversation, who your audience is, who do you think should watch it or would watch it. Defining the hero of your piece. And that's probably a term that everyone in the room has at least some familiarity with, and you know what I mean by it. But it's shocking to me how many writers I teach who don't bring the hero of their story into focus as much as they should. It's something that they take as obvious, but when I start to ask questions, just to put it in practical terms, they can't answer the question about who the hero even is. And that is also a recipe for disaster. I talked about in the last one when I said if the characters are muddy, I can tell the show won't work. There's also a similar issue with shows that there's one on right. I hope I don't get in trouble. Do you all know who George Lopez is? So he had the George Lopez show prior. The new show is called Lopez versus Lopez. That's a new one. Has anybody seen that?
I just read about it today. Have not seen it.
So I'm not trashing it. There is an issue with it though, because in Lopez versus Lopez, it's him and the other Lopez is his daughter, a fictional daughter, but that's why it's called Lopez versus Lopez. The show does not know who its hero is. So I'll just give you that as a brief example since you haven't really seen it. But Lopez versus Lopez makes it the definition, just to make this point, it means that there are two heroes in the show. Do you know what I mean? Like Will and Grace, Mike and Molly, Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, the odd couple. There's all kinds of titles, and titles tell you a lot more than you think about shows, by the way. I just gave you an example. Any show that's called Somebody and Somebody, they're the hero together. Hero doesn't mean singular. It doesn't necessarily mean one person. But George Lopez is such a huge star, and he's the only reason that the show's getting made, that all the focus is going to him, like it's like it's being called the George Lopez Show Part 2. But there's two leads, there's two heroes in the show, and they don't know what to do in terms of creating the story. There's a confusion there because, well, I'm getting ahead of my slides, but I'll just finish this thought since it's in my head. You have to write to your hero's journey. Your show's destined to have more than one lead character, right? But lead character and hero aren't synonymous. Because a hero can be one person, it can be two people together, or it can be the whole group like Friends. So even if you say who's the hero of the show, the hero can be a whole group. I'll talk about that more later, but there's a preview. So your tribe, so your hero versus your tribe. So, and being distinct and clear about who goes in which one of those, as I was just talking about. The universe of your show, film, the sets that you're going to use, especially for TV, but it still applies to movies, and jokes and humor, since we're talking about comedy today. So, concept. What story are you telling? What is your vision? And there's a picture from... Okay. I really thought hard about that. So, when I said earlier that there's maybe hidden gems or nuggets underneath the shows, and it's not just like, oh, it's good or bad. Like if it's working, and especially if it's hot and it hits and it's firing on all cylinders, it catches the ether. I knew you especially in the front, that you'd get my Euphoria reference. Popular show these days. And even with all the content, a couple of things seem to break out here and there and grab the conversation, right? So it's not just about story ideas, literal story ideas. Woven within are themes And this is also how product gets sold, by the way. So this is really straight up practical information I'm giving you. Let's just pretend for a moment while I talk about this slide that we're working backwards from a pitch session. You got an opportunity to pitch your idea to somebody. They're gonna ask you these questions. So this isn't just my theory, this is real world knowledge and experience. If you can't answer to this, you're gonna be in rough shape. Not only creating your product, but getting anybody to collaborate with you on it or buy it. Does that make sense? Right, because they're gonna ask, well, what themes are we hitting? Because anybody who can buy your product that you really wanna work with is simultaneously processing your idea and thinking of how to sell it and how much money they wanna sink into it to produce it. And then the other chunk of money that nobody ever wants to talk about is what do I have to pay to advertise it and sell it? And is this gonna be TikTok and Instagram ads, YouTube ads, or like what are we talking here? All of that is going on in the brains of network studios. So I mean, yes, I'm talking about the top of the food chain, but why not think big, right? So when I say theme, does your idea take place within a working class family or an upper class family? That's a huge difference. That alone is a conversation, right? Modern Family worked partly because it was almost like a commercial for an ideal family. Like we had Roseanne in the 80s, which took us to middle America, full-on blunt reality. Dan the Bills came in and I sent it in, but I didn't sign the check. So it'll buy us time. So we don't have enough money. So I sent in as if I paid, and then they'll write me back and say, but you didn't sign the check. And so then I'll have to write another one, but it'll buy us time. The way a lot of people in America really live and function. And, you know, and those aren't the only two shows, but there was a gap of kind of just like a American family comedy for a while. And so it came back around again, and it swung hard with Modern Family. But it was very aspirational. It had the reality of like, Jay had a trophy, second wife, there was a gay couple in there, so it was modernized in a way. But they were all very rich. Those weren't middle class people, by the way. Just so you know, if you ever watched Modern Family. They lived in the Pacific Palisades, y'all. Their houses were all $7 million, not one or two. Yes, that's what it cost to live in the Pacific Palisades. They didn't talk about it, but Jay was rich. And actually Phil was rich. They were like very, very well off. I'm not saying billionaires, but you know what I mean? It wasn't really showing you middle class America. It was, and it made you feel like it was. That's the point. So when I say aspirational, it was almost like a commercial. Like the reason that show worked was not just because everybody was aching for a show just about a family. They kind of were actually, because was missing. But if you get my point, what America fell in love with and the world fell in love with was, it was kind of like Friends and how they afforded those apartments. Remember when we used to talk about that? Like, oh sure, there's apartments in Manhattan that big and that they can all afford. Yeah. It was like, it gave you this boost of what life could look like if nothing was really wrong. That was a choice that they made. So it wasn't just that comedy writers wrote a funny show, right? Writers who sell and get their content distributed really think in terms of these things. So like parenting. So Modern Family was also a show about parenting. There was a very successful movie called Parenthood, and then they made a show called Parenthood. And it wasn't just a rando choice. That's marketable. That's sellable. Parents, we all have them. But do you know what I mean? It's such a simple theme, and you can say, well, that's not exciting or that's not interesting, but it's sellable, and it's specific, and you can talk about it, and you can talk about it in detail, in a pitch, meaning you can literally go, this is probably obvious to you, whether you're a parent or not, Mr. or Mrs. Moneybags. But we're gonna go through, you know, the era of a toddler, the era of a teenager. We're gonna put parenting under a microscope. That's how you sell stuff. And I think a lot of people think more like, blow me away with an idea and I'll either say yes or no, just based on an impulse. This is the conversation. Is your show about sex? Sex in the City. They put it right in the title. Right? 2.5 Men. Actually, sadly, because it involved a child, but that was a show about sex. Because Charlie Sheen playing Charlie Harper was a player as a lead character, and it was largely about his sexual exploits. And his brother having to move in with his young son to see it, etc. Californication is a show about sex and sexual compulsion. So it's not just something that can come up as a topic sometimes, in other words. Sometimes the whole show is based on sex. Well, Euphoria. A show about just friendship. Friends is obvious, but, Seinfeld. And you just got the core cast and the core group are friends who spend an inordinate amount of time with people. There's a lot more era shows than you might think. Let's have a conversation. Do you know what I mean by era? Going back in a different time period? What are some era shows, friends?
Good Times.
Good Times.
And Archie Bunker.
Well, they're not. No, that's not what I mean.
Oh,
those. That's okay.
Yeah.
They weren't a different era than the time they were produced.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of the Wonder Years?
The Wonder Years.
Oh, there you
Both
go.
of the Wonder Years. Yes, sir.
Well, that 70s show kind of?
That 70s show and that 80s show. Because that was a thing too.
Comedy. Westworld, that's comedy. I mean, that's drama.
But that's fine, but you're thinking the right way, right? So it goes both ways. So ahead in the timeline, Westworld.
Mad Men?
Huh?
Mad Men? No. Mad Men?
Mad Men, yes, an era show. Right, it was made in a more recent time, but it was about 60s advertising. So Happy Days was an era show. I mean, it's an old blast from the past, but it was about the 50s, made in the 70s, so etc. The Wonder Years. Silicon Valley was an era show. Sure. You literally, I heard a Scooby-Doo noise when you touched your Do you know why? Do you know Silicon Valley?
Not so much.
It's about when we started the tech industry and stuff, right?
And it was already about
Couple of
12 years, right, ahead. So it didn't go back like Happy Days where it's like, oh, it's the 70s, let's go all the way back 20 years to the 50s to explore a whole different look or vibe. It still felt very current, but indeed, it did go back like 10 or 12 years because it was at the beginning of tech when we were already living with tech. So in its own weird way, that addresses era. I just bring that up because most people don't think of it that way, but that's a selling point to the show. Because we're going to do a take on the beginning of startups now that because we had to have lived with it in order to go back to the beginning of it. Does it have a message? What could a message be? A message of social justice, equality, diverse lives. So if you look at a show like Transparent, which is an older show, but it was very successful for the hot minute that it came on. It still was just a show about parents and their adult siblings and the problems in a way like no different than a lot of other shows that feature parents and adult siblings. Frasier, Modern Family, on and on and on and on. It's just that we can talk about different subject matters. We become more and more free as the eras go on. Transparent is not the first time a trans character was ever discussed or introduced in television history. Actually, All in the Family did that way back in the 70s with Norman Lear. But a show wouldn't have been made with a lead going through a transition of a sexual orientation until the time that we had it. So that's also where you mine your ideas. You don't need so much an idea that nobody ever could have possibly ever in the world thought of, and yours is so unique and original and special that's what it is. Smart writers examine life and the world around them for what it is and the way it is right now, and just go, well, what haven't we talked about before? Because it was too taboo. And as you go through TV history, you'll see this very clear lineage of ideas being talked about only maybe in one episode of a broader series one time, like a trans character, and then being turned into the main topic of a show. It's happened over and over and over and over. Satire. it is really important for comedy writers to understand the complete definition of these words so that you could teach it to somebody else. I always put that onus on it because comedy, especially in this day and age, is so specific and can be so incredibly intelligent. You're behind the 8 ball if you don't know what satire is and parody and irony and are able to layer it in and weaponize it and use it or not use it. So what are examples? Satire is mocking of society in brief. So Beep, Silicon Valley, and then The Simpsons are examples of satire. Not the only ones, but there are some. Parody is mocking of a genre. So if any of you watched Reno 911, Scream Queens, there's a show called Angie Tribeca. Not a lot of people know that show, but it goes to the airplane, Naked Gun, all that kind of humor. And then irony, unexpected or behavior or circumstances given what the audience sees. So one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Nurse Jackie, starring Edie Falco. So if you don't know the show, I can still easily tell you why it's an example of irony. Nurse Jackie is a nurse, and a good nurse, and a truly, truly caring person. Like if you ever were in bad shape and needed a nurse, you wanted Nurse Jackie. But she was also a drug addict and a liar, cheating on her husband and using the pharmacist at the hospital to get pills to feed her drug addiction, and lied to literally everyone about literally everything. That's ironic, right? That the world sees this beautiful, giving, loving, tough, but good-hearted, caring nurse. And everything else about her life is wrong, betrayal, and scandalous. Ironic. Okay. Mom is on the list, if you know that show with Anna Faris and Allison Janney. It's ironic because the moms are upside down. So in short, Barry's ironic because he's both a person who wants to, find out who he is through the creative arts, but is also a serial killer. In Schitt's Creek. Any questions about any of that? Or was that alone helpful to get you started? Okay, good. This presentation is, I do sit alone in my room and just think sometimes. It is true that I do that. I've done that since I was a kid. But the presentation is not born out of that. This presentation in particular, well, the other one too, but this is really, I just turned the notes that I give people the most about their first draft or their ideas or their treatments, and I read their treatments. This is just a translation of the notes that I give. Okay, so like I said, I'll review this and move on. Someone would say, what's the theme? Do you have a theme? How do I sell it? Who's the audience? Is it middle America? Is it coastal? Like, who watches? What's ironic about it? What's satirical about it? It doesn't have that, it doesn't have that. Okay, I gotta sell something. And it's not just, it's another comedy somebody wrote. That is not enough. All right. We'll do this real quick. I'll talk about single cam versus multicam for anybody who thinks about their content going to TV. Multicam, and I'll make this down and dirty, quick and simple. Multicams are the shows where you hear the laughter, right? They are theater. It is a very simple definition. It's televised theater, period, simple. The reason I say that is because people, if they talk about it at all, say it's like this, or it's kind of like they struggle to explain. It's theater, and it's recorded with a camera, period, full stop. Single cams are cinematic and made like movies. So it's that simple of a difference. But for my writers and content creators here, it is important to know multicams aren't super in fashion. That is true these days. But the networks and even the streaming services are very heavily invested in them because when they hit, they turn into financial juggernauts that other single cam comedies and dramas cannot compare to. the most earning TV series in television history are Friends and Seinfeld. Multicam sitcoms with laugh tracks. And then right behind it, Big Bang Theory. They have generated so much money. It is, and continue to generate it well into the future. It is beyond comprehension.
And are they generating it because it's low cost, or what is it that is making it?
Well, it started out with residuals at first, and then franchise fees. But then those shows are old enough that when streaming hit, the studios that owned them leased them. So there was a period of time where, for example, Friends was on Netflix. Okay, that was a $2 billion purchase, billion with a B, because there's such a demand for Friends, and Netflix, they didn't want to rerun it on NBC again, right? So when the way the streaming, this is a little bit of a detour, but you should all know it. So you know how just a few years ago it was kind of like the networks and then Netflix and then Hulu. And that was kind of it. You know what I mean? Like that era. And then it started to multiply with Amazon, and then all the like HBO, Warner, Time Warner, Discovery, and then now Paramount Plus and Peacock Plus, and there's all these subscription streamers now. What happened is all of the actual studios brought their product home to mama and papa. So, where some of these older shows that I'm talking about, like Friends, Seinfeld, etc., whatever network that they originally aired on, they could have been created and owned by another studio. So even though Friends was on NBC, it's owned by Warner Media. So they leased it out to Netflix for that period of time for a huge chunk, but when Time Warner, HBO, we're going to be our own thing, they brought all of their product home. The two biggest shows that they led with to make that deal were Game of Thrones and Friends, because they own them and they're so valuable, and they will be valuable forever. So there's a little inside TV history and streaming service history, if that helps you all to know. That's why we're having so many streaming options now, because nothing's going to be like leased or franchised anymore. Like everything that's ever been created in TV history is going to go to the parent company that originally owned and produced it, or it will be bought by one of those. Does that make sense to everybody? So just to give you insight on why you're watching what you're watching on what platform. Yeah.
So is there a style of thing with the multicam that is just more successful opposed to the single cam? I'm kind of confused. Like what makes it more? It's just because it's cheaper to produce. That's the main thing.
Well, they can be cheaper to produce, but that's not what cheaper produce is. Not why people still go to bed watching Friends, and then literally fall asleep with it playing in the background. It's funny, multicams theater shows live in front of a studio audience get the rap for being bigger, broader, and more cartoony. And actually the opposite is true. Really, really good multicams are shows like Good Times, Frasier. We've talked about so many of them, all of Norman Lear's shows, groundbreaking shows. If you think about multicams, they usually take place in just on a couple of sets in somebody's home. You know what I mean? We spend 9 years in somebody's living room. They are typically successful because of the comfort they bring us, as well as the laughter and the lack of zany antics that happen on single cam shows, because they can go out in the world and do actually wacky, clownish, cartoonish things that you can't pull off when you basically have a set stage that's like on a theater for a play. You know what I mean? You can't have explosions in the friend's apartment. You can't have special effects. Like, it's literally just relationship based. Single cams tend to be circumstance and experience based. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we fall in love with the multicam characters because they're just hanging out in their living room, and friends, to make the point, really start to feel like our friends. Because all they talk about is, where's my career heading? Who are we dating? Who do we like? Who do we not like? And it keeps us all perennial teenagers and feel like we're sharing space with really nice, warm, funny people and this is the key, in a believable way. And people say that multicams are the ones that don't feel real, and it's not true, and the money they make bears it out. And I love single camera shows. Schitt's Creek is a recent, very funny show that many of us watch. Do any of you know a family that's rich enough to own a backup town in case, right? So just so you know, Schitt's Creek wasn't about just that they lost their money and moved to Schitt's. Why did they move to Schitt's Creek? They owned it. The dad bought that town as a joke for his son when they were uber rich. So they moved to Schitt's Creek because they actually owned the town, not because they had to move somewhere cheaper. I love Schitt's Creek. Don't get me wrong, that's not me shading the show. That's me making the point that the concepts of single cams are oftentimes not relatable and super cartoony and actually way more adolescent. Roseanne is a more sophisticated show, a multicam, than Schitt's Creek, and I love Schitt's Creek. Norman Lear's shows, again, you know, if you go through TV history, what broke real ground was mostly multicam comedies. So, obviously I get passionate about this topic. But did that help, not just you who asked, did that help you all understand?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, and I know young people don't watch a lot of multicams. You probably can't even see a new one that's on right now. Anybody watch a multicam?
My sister watches Fuller House.
Yeah, no, that counts. But there you have it. And that's where it lands. But the reason I also I ran a little defense in here and put up some numbers. So the pilot purchases, they're only for the networks and they don't include streamers, I grant you. But it's not like multicams have completely disappeared. So you can look at the numbers there. I did the last 5 years. So 2017, it was 23 single, 8 multicam, but in 2018, they made more multicam pilots. And then 2019, it was almost even, 11, 12. 2020, 15 and 12, and then 2021, 11 and 9. So the studios want to buy these. So for today and for this moment, I'll just say, writing a multicam is like writing a play. Because you can't write in any camera direction. There's no zoom in, punch in, angle on, camera shows. You can't have a character get it on a multicam. If a character gets a text, they have to look at it and go, oh my God, Bill just said blank. They have to read it aloud because all of the shots are broad shots. Nobody zooms in on anything on a multicam. Do y'all get what I'm saying? When you write a single cam, you can go out into the real world and not just stay contained to the sets inside the soundstage. You can do all of those kinds of things. And especially like with shows like Euphoria and stuff, you see actually the text on the screen all the time, right? So the writer has to write that and make that clear. It's not like a production decision. So as the content creator, you've got to think that through. Yeah?
There must be some shows that like mix the two, right?
There are a couple of examples, but they're pretty few and far between. How I Met My Mother was not shot in front of an audience, but the laughter was mixed in. And then a lot of the Nickelodeon and Disney shows, the kids shows, do the same thing, not because they're cheap, but because professional kid actors have such specific work requirements and time constraints that they can't afford to be late and load an audience and have the audience wait, etc. So they typically just have the crew laugh on those shows, and then they sweeten it with laughter. But by and large, most multicams that want to be a multicam want an audience. And they want to do it that way if they can. I can leave that side there for now. Any questions or thoughts about the difference between multicam, single cam? It's a decision to be made up front. So again, this really also has to do with TV. Most of what was created in television history as a TV comedy was episodic. meaning as the episodes rolled out week by week by week, they were self-contained. The story and the play, like you got the characters and a sense of characters, and there might even be a through line in relationships, like who's dating who's breaking up with who, or whatever. But that's also why multicams are so beloved. You can watch an episode of Friends, you can pick one from the middle. Episode 18 from season 6. And you get who the characters are right away. And maybe Ross and Rachel were together or not together in that episode, but that's not going to be the point of that story. It'll just be, it's like, Friends was famous for titling their episodes, the one about blank. Everybody would always say that in writers' rooms because you had to have some title of your pilot, but they'd give it some more eloquent title, like A Butterfly's Delight. Or something dumb, but you know what I mean? That would be the title of the episode of a show. And they would know and it would refer to a joke or a theme in the story. But Friends just laid it bare. They were like, it's the one about blank, the one about the monkey, the one about divorce, the one where the one about Dad's birthday party. And they just said it flat out. And then that was reflected in experiencing the show, is my point, right? You can just watch one at any point. Serialized means it's like a film cut up. Or actually even one better, because that kind of cheapens it. Barry, the reason I have Bill Hader there is because I think he's a genius. But also, Barry did such a good job of leaving you with cliffhangers. It wasn't like it just got chopped up, right? They would end it with going, it's 2 a.m, but I have to watch one more because I need to know.
Absolutely.
Serialized, like a soap opera, like a melodrama. So that is a decision people need to make up front too when they're creating their content. So multi-cam or single cam, episodic or serialized. If it's serialized, it's destined to be a single cam. There is no such thing as a serialized multi-cam TV comedy. Tone, what is your show's personality? How would you describe it? You're gonna have to put words to it. So a comedy is too broad. That's the very basic starting point. Is it realistic? Is it absurd? Let's get some examples and maybe a conversation. If I say a realistic comedy, single, multicam, it doesn't matter. What do you think of when I say just a realistic comedy, that it seems to reflect life as you know it? Mine is Roseanne. I know it's an old reference, but that's what comes up on an impulse.
Friends.
Which one?
Friends.
Friends? Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, largely. Anything?
Comeback.
Huh?
The comeback.
Okay, go ahead, Kim. We should call your therapist and say it's an emergency. One of my favorite shows of all time, I actually have it on DVD, and I watch it every year. If I say an absurd comedy. 30 Rock. It was absurdist, yeah. I think of Schitt's Creek, that was my first one. I just think it's absurd. Sophisticated.
Big Bang Theory, probably.
Veep.
Yeah.
Episodes.
Veep, episodes. I'm with you on episodes. Also, so good.
Fleabag.
Fleabag and Frasier, actually. Satirical.
SNL.
Yeah. Good front row. Yeah, I'm giving you 2 credit too, even though I haven't heard from you. Family focused. So we don't have to go through all of them, but you get it. What if I said dark comedy? What?
Barry.
Barry is one. It's actually, if you look on IMDb, it says comedy crime thriller, I think it's called. So it's like you get all these hybrids thrown in.
Oh, Dead to Me.
And Dead to Me. I mean, just the unparalleled. What other shows does it feel like? So you might have the impulse that the answer should be, no, it's not a trick question. It should be like something. That you sell things, especially if you're newer. You don't want to try to go in saying there's nothing to even relate it to. Ma'am, will you buy it, produce it, and spend all of your money advertising it? It's not like anything. That terrifies people. If you're young and you say that, or if you're older and say that. But it's not that you want to copy things, but you want to have some reference point, right? They don't want something to come down from Mars and, that's never existed. And if you do get away with something like Barry, it gets sold, and you should just know this, because he's already established, famous, and, can front as an actor and put his own neck on the line. You know what I mean? It's a very, very, very big difference. Or another high concept show that I haven't mentioned today that I love is The Good Place. More recent, right? But Mike Schur worked on The Office and Parks and Rec before he could get that made. I guarantee you, if he had not had a name, they weren't gonna sign off on a show that had incredibly expensive special effects, because things were falling from the sky and it was heavenly and otherworldly, and a huge sprawling cast too. There were a lot of people on that show, actually, if you watched it. It was expensive, y'all. So if he didn't have a track record, they wouldn't have made it. So, especially in the beginning, then it can deviate. But it should feel like something. People sell shows by saying it's like if this show and this show had a baby, it would be this show. And people go, okay, I get that. Hybrids of other genres we've already talked about. There's comedy crime, comedy horror. What are some comedy horror shows?
What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
That's such a good
Jane the Virgin.
It's a comedy telenovela. Yeah.
That's a comedy horror, right?
Is it a horror? I don't know. The Santa Clarita Diet, if anybody watched that. Right, so there's a few. Stan versus Evil, Ash versus the Evil Dead.
I've seen that.
And how about the American Horror, AHH, all those shows?
You take Ryan Murphy however you want. Is he making comedy? Is he making drama? I'm not sure. I enjoy them, but I don't know how to label them. I don't know what he's doing, what goes on in that guy's head. Does it match your personal vibe? Let me ask you, why do you think I would put that question? It seems like an obvious question, right? Why would I take this presentation to a lot of places. Why would I put that question here?
I know.
You do know? Do you? What, Kamala?
Because you're the one that have to sell it to somebody, and if it doesn't match you, they're not going to get the vibe, the feeling that you're trying to portray.
That's correct, but why do you think I need to, as a teacher or coach, why do I need to remind people to do that?
Because they're going to do what they think those people want to
That
do.
is the answer. Some people create from a place of, and maybe it's not you, maybe it is, but I put it here for a reason. You don't want to create from a place where you think you're going to please somebody else, because you just never will. They will be pleased and excited by your personal voice being magnified. And then Ryan Murphy is born. I love some stuff he does, I hate some stuff he does, but he's completely unique and it's all identifiable. That's what you want. That's what you want. So don't sit around and wait for the big mega billion, dollar idea for like lightning to strike. Create. The name of the game is honing your voice. So you can talk about not just your product, but why your voice is distinct and different and special in the universe. And you step up to that with pride and excitement and confidence and clarity. And then you win. Then you just mop the floor with the competition. This is my favorite question. I love this question. How do you want your show to make people feel? I ask that all the time. No one has an answer. And also, doesn't it just make sense to think about it? No one thinks about it. They're so consumed. Writing is so cerebral. And people get so caught up in their idea and consumed with their idea and thinking about their idea and trying to figure out their idea and figure their way out of their idea to get to the end. They don't think about how you want to feel. And just saying it's comedy so I want people to laugh, that's not a feeling, that's a verb. Laughing is an action, right? Were you going to say something?
No, I'm just thinking about that.
So if you were at all thinking like, well, so what do you mean by that? Like, it's comedy. So even if I write a comedy Well, Barry, he wants you to feel disturbed. Bill Hader wrote, especially the last season, was disturbing.
It wasn't as funny as it was before. Like,
No, it wasn't.
It's like Atlanta, if you ever watched that show. Like the second season,
My
they had a
friend.
bunch of stories that just were so disturbing.
Let's talk about Atlanta. The show's so good. It's so good. But you're making the point. The creators, the showrunners, the production know how they want you to feel. And you can laugh and cry at different episodes in different moments. But I could write a comedy that wants you to feel sad, shaken, disturbed. I could want it to be thought-provoking. Or I could want you to feel comfortable, relaxed, and then we go back to Friends and the success of things that are comfort food. And I don't say that in a dismissive, bad way. We want to feel good, and life is hard. If you can watch something for free or $5.95 a month now, whatever it is to you, but if you can watch something and just push a button and go, look, it just makes me feel good, there's nothing bad about it, and there's no cost to it, watch it. And some people create shows to that end, and the networks all know that they need a spectrum. It's like everybody, especially writers these days, feel like they need to create the next big edgy thing. And look, there's a marketplace for edgy, but and it makes an impression and it makes a splash. But there always needs to be at least one family comedy on too. There needs to be something that 3 generations in a household can all watch together, and nobody has to worry if it's too much, and you'll have to explain something to the kids. Well, you know what I mean? It's valid. And maybe I don't want to watch that, but I don't know, sometimes maybe I do. Audience, who is it for? TV, film, it doesn't matter. And I mentioned this before, but I'll reiterate it here. And you don't have to be an analytics expert or a demographics expert of any kind, but you'll need to answer this. So I'll just work backwards from that. I'll work backwards from your meeting. They will say, who do you expect to watch it? Male, female, age range. And know that the studios and networks, and even other platforms, even all the way down to TikTok, they have analytics who's watching any given video in terms of not only age and gender, but location. Location very specifically meaning, in industry terms, there is the idea that the coastal is more, both sides. Is more intelligent, sophisticated. And then middle America is, shows that are less challenging. Like there was a sitcom called The Middle. There was Malcolm in the Middle. Roseanne was in Illinois. Reba McEntire's shows are very successful. She's had a couple of sitcoms. Tim Allen's shows, Last Man Standing, etc. Those are not, they're not made and marketed. Anybody can watch them, we all understand that. But they're not made and marketed to certain demographics. So you all get my point there? Mm-hmm. So whatever your body of knowledge is of the world and the way it works, do have some thoughts about that. And it'll help you have a more successful collaboration. Hero. Okay, so I love talking about this slide. I already alluded it to before. So I didn't even put any words on this. I'm like, I just want them to listen to me. Don't look at bullet points. This is so important. And people get it so wrong, and it's the most important thing. The definition of writing 101, there's a lot more to be said. I'm not here saying I'm giving you every thought in the world about writing or creating content in 90 minutes. But the most base definition is find a hero, send him on a journey. And story is, in a nutshell, the hero overcoming conflict. That's what story and narrative is. So many people, and so you know that if you have a show or a film, you're gonna have several lead characters, right? Let's just go step by step. The hero can be one of them. The hero can be a pair together. Literally the phrase buddy comedy means, no, it's the two, they're bonded together as the hero. Or it can be the whole group. And if you examine the product that's been successful in history, in both TV and film, the titles, as I said, tell you a lot. The reason it's important to have a clear definition of your hero is because all story needs to circle back to the hero and include the hero. And when shows don't do that, they go down. And I can tell in 3 episodes if the show gets that or not. Lopez versus Lopez. You weren't here. Yeah. Okay, I addressed it earlier, you weren't through. So, I think you all get what I mean, but let's get some examples on the table. So, Roseanne, Seinfeld, The Newhart Show, Cosby. Any others that you can think of, one-namers, or it points to one person's name? Reba, yeah.
Talking about groups of
I'm talking about shows with titles that have one person's name.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Frasier.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Coach.
Coach. Frasier. There you go. Good. Are you kicking me out or are you?
Soon.
So, okay, so it's important because we all know that those shows have a regular cast, a regular dedicated cast who's in all the episodes, right? Mm-hmm. But they all aren't the hero. So just to make the example, whether you know the show or not, I'll just use Roseanne, just for the sake of time. So it was Roseanne, her husband, their 3 kids, and her sister Jackie were the primary cast. So the show, we know it's Roseanne's World because it's called Roseanne. It was right there in the title. So the point I'm making is when your hero is singular, everybody's story has to come back to Roseanne. Roseanne's story can include any and all of the people, and it doesn't have to take care of anything else. But if Jackie, as a series regular lead character, played by Laurie Metcalf, one of America's best actors, period, and John Goodman, another one of America's best actors, period, they don't get stories that don't include Roseanne. They don't get that. Whatever happens to them, it either happens with Roseanne or it happens independent of her, and they have to come back and bring it back to her. Do you understand that? And the reason I get so excited about talking about this is because I didn't read this in any frickin' TV writing book that I've read, and I've read all of them. My bookshelf is full. And I had to figure this out myself. If it isn't a book, tell me what book it is, because I had nobody explain this to me. And then you've got the 2 peoples, the Anns. Mork and Mindy, Mike and Molly, Laverne and Shirley, Will and Grace, The Odd Couple. On and on and on. You've got this whole list of 2-handers, buddy comedy, meaning they still might have a series regular cast of 4 to 6 people, plus their guest stars, but it's the pair's journey. Will and Grace is the best example of this. Jack and Karen were such strong characters and a force to be reckoned with in their own right. But Jack and Karen did not get stories that didn't circle back to Will and Grace. So like Karen, for example, when she had problems with her husband's unseen husband, Stan, and she needed a lawyer. Who was her lawyer? Will. Like they always found a way to bring it back to the leads. And then the last one is the toughest one to contend with, I think, when the group is the hero. What's the example? Friends. There isn't a lead. And famously, David Schwimmer had the most sway when Friends was new. Their first season was a huge hit. When they went into negotiations, it started to immediately splinter off because of all of their agents, and they were like, the person I represent is the star. So they want to get more. Long story short, David Schwimmer put the kibosh on that immediately and said, let's negotiate as a group. It'll be more powerful and none of us is the star. And it's not written that way. He's like, we're all the star. It just depends on what's happening in an episode. That's also another reason why we love Friends so much. There actually aren't a long list of shows. As obvious and simple as Friends seems, there is not a long list of shows with 6 star equally billed characters. It's usually the other 2 that I listed, a single and other cast members or a pair and other cast members. But Friends could go anywhere it wanted with any of the 6 of those at any given time. And that's actually harder to write because your options then become infinity. Not like, well, if something happens to Dan, he's got to go home and tell Roseanne. That's kind of easy to figure out, right? Any questions on that? Okay. Important. Do you agree that it's important? Okay, because I get worked up. The heroes of comedy, define your tribe. So if you were here for the last presentation, here's the network's proof that I'm right. Because I didn't create this graphic. This is what NBC released for The Good Place. I added the words at the bottom. I was the one who wrote innocent, neurotic, narcissist, etc. as they're discussed in the book. But the picture also kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, isn't each one of them, with their look, their body language, their wardrobe, telling you who they are? All I did was just watch and label it. But this is, I was so overjoyed when I found this graphic, because I was like, okay, it proves the point. So again, TV, film, it doesn't matter. You want your characters, it's not about, they can have backstory or not, in terms of information. What matters far more is that you decide whether they are an innocent person, a neurotic person, a cynical person, and as you, as a writer, can think in that mode. I'll speak for myself, and I know other writers who feel the same. When I write and I'm really in flow, I come out of it, it's almost like coming out of a trance and I feel schizophrenic. Because when I'm writing my eccentric character, I start to feel eccentric. Then I write my neurotic character and I get all kind of anxious and upset because I'm writing for her. And then I write my cynical character who just doesn't give a crap. And it's fine. It's like you need to be you need to think like different people in order to write different voices. So it's a direct challenge, can you? I don't know what the answer is, right? It's rhetorical. But your characters ideally are so distinct that they think differently from one another. That's crystal clear and shows up in the dialogue. And the dialogue, therefore, does not become interchangeable. Friends is also a great example. So many others, but a Joey thing to say is a Joey thing to say. A Phoebe thing to say is a Phoebe thing. You cannot just throw those lines around and be like, oh, Rachel can say this. She's a narcissist. She's got Rachel things to say. Do you know what I mean? And that is also a huge, huge component of why things become successful or not. And we register that subconsciously. Most people I know don't watch a show and go, oh my God, I loved it so much. Did you register how distinct each character's voice was from one another and how unlikely it is that you could switch the dialogue around? No one says that. But it actually matters very deeply to all of us as an audience member, because when it's there, it's one of those things that just feels great and you don't know why. Sets, think about writing, you know, even if you're just, you know, having to super ballpark it or guesstimate it for TV shows, but even for films. Consider the budget, consider the sets. You know, don't just go from one place to another place to another place to another place to another place, unless it's the purpose of the film or something. But one of the most common mistakes I see when people are writing TV, and when I go, this is a film, not a TV show, is when they don't exploit their sets. I mean, you all watch TV shows, they don't go to a million different places, even single cams, do you know what I mean? Like we need to reuse the sets, so just make sure that that's incorporated in writing in your thought process. Even if you're writing a movie. The universe, where are they? What are the rules? So what region of the country, what city does your show require imagined rules? How do you describe the show's universe? What does it feel like to live where they live? So I put a picture of genius Amy Poehler as Leslie Knope in Parks and Rec. Show's so good. And what it did in particular was to just absolutely exploit the universe of this small town of Pawnee. And what it felt like to live there, you really had a feeling that the writers had a grasp of that small chunk of land in this country and what the people were like, how they thought. They had a competing town of Eagleton, you know, it was just, it felt like you were being transported into a place. The Good Place is another show that is, you have to know what its laws and boundaries are before you start writing it, right? Because it's in another place, another realm. And just don't forget that TV or film, picking a location is not just creative, it's strategic. When I mentioned Frasier, where do you think of? It's enmeshed. When I say Cheers, where do you think of? Boston. When I say Sex and the City, where do you think of?
New York.
It matters a lot. And you know, however much or not it shows up to the party, you need to think more holistically about the environment, and that we are a very large regional country, and different sections of it feel very differently than the others. And a lot of writers really don't include that in their thought process, film or TV, when they're deciding where it's going to be. They're just like, oh, pick a place. But it, you know, the setting can be so influential. So I'll just review this very quickly. There's so many different ways to create humor. So, and jokes. Pop culture references of the moment are going to get a laugh. Specific references versus general references. And what I mean by that is, don't just have your character leave and say, I'm going to the store. Say what store. It can be real or fictional, it doesn't matter. But any amount of specificity is better than generality. Esoteric and arcane references, Frasier was epically famous for that. He was constantly saying crap that people are like, what are you talking about, you bozo? Classic setup punchline jokes, set it up, knock it down. Old school vaudevillian Jewish Catskills American humor. Set it up, knock it down. Reversals and turnarounds, oh, I love that shirt, not on you. That was so smart for you to say for such a dumb person. You know, you just do that all day long and people will laugh. Triplets, comedy comes in threes. 3 is the magic number. It can be same, and just with emphasis. Or it could be same, surprise. So you can mix it up on the third or not mix it up. But odd numbers, comedy comes in 3s. And then if you have to go further, then go to 5. Don't stop at 4. I can't explain it. Trust me, it's true. Even numbers aren't funny. I'm sorry, 2. I made it funny. Reversals or turnarounds, triplets, catchphrases. How you doing? All right. Probably got sick of saying it, but I would love Matt LeBlanc's bank account. Banter or wordplay. What is a show or a sitcom, TV comedy, any show that you, when I think of banter or witty wordplay, what do you think of?
Arrested Development.
Arrested Development, for sure. Frasier. I also think of 30 Rock, because the dialogue between Jack and Liz was straight, you know, Hepburn and Tracy. It went right back to 40s films. It was sexy, it was crisp, it was written to be said fast and sharp. That's what I mean by banter. It's not just casual conversation. It's escalated, competitive, maybe with sexual innuendo thrown in there. That's banter. Observation or point of view. You mentioned one of my favorite shows, Atlanta. It's, I'm blanking on the character's name right now. It's not because I don't love the show, it's just because I'm tired. But they do an incredible job of writing things that make me laugh out loud, and it's just the characters observing the world around them.
It's Darius.
It's
that
Darius.
One guy,
Yes.
The one guy that will just go to the most random stores in Europe and then end up in like the catacombs. It's so
And it was just like, he's just speaking to his experience of the world, right? So, I mean, it's entirely different show, but he's the eccentric. He's basically the Phoebe of that show and that world. So that's also why you want a strong grasp of character distinction and point of view, because you can get huge laughs just from people saying, this is the way I saw that experience, and fill in the blank with something funny. But you don't need to craft a joke as much as just think like they think and then have them say the thing that no one else in the group would say. Physical humor, slapstick. Can anybody think of a fairly recent show that traded in... Actually, can anybody define slapstick? Direct challenge, throwdown. Yes.
Physical comedy.
That's part of it, but that's actually not the complete.
So like overacting actions, I guess?
No.
Are you carrying it to the farness of like a violent act that becomes comedic?
It's physical humor that includes severe embarrassment or violence humiliation or pain. That's the actual definition. Sounds intense, right? Did anybody see Baskets?
Yeah, love that show.
What was Charlie Basket?
He was a clown.
Rodeo clown.
Rodeo clown, he was the French clown there, and he got hit by the bulldozer.
So in the pilot, the very first thing that you see is him in the ring getting mowed over by a bull.
Yeah.
If it really happened, that would really hurt. It wasn't comedy, run over by a bull, yeah, run over by a bull. So it's, a lot of people think it's like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, and it is. But I just want to give you a frame of reference that it's played a big part in a very successful, more current comedy, Baskets. It was very much involved slapstick comedy, done it very well. And then last but not least, my favorite word, sarcasm. American comedy in particular is extremely sarcastic. British are a close second with their dry British take, but Americans are more freely sarcastic than any other nation and culture and kind of people in the world. Some people just don't do it, you know. You wouldn't be like a Japanese business person starting the first day of the job and be sarcastic with your boss. It'd be like everybody would just die in horror in the moment, right? But I'd start a new job and I'd be like, nice tie, Bill. I don't care. I'm American. We tend to think we can joke, you know, with whomever. Anyway, I'll just say this. Examine your relationship with sarcasm. And I don't want to leave you on too somber a note, but sarcasm is just, the definition of sarcasm is actually inverse words, saying one thing but meaning another. We've broadened it out to mean just a tone. So in other words, I could say, hi is a greeting. Well, that is the right word to greet you, but the tone underneath is off, right? So either of those things are sarcasm. I know a lot of people who want to trade in comedy, both writing and acting, and they don't have a healthy relationship with sarcasm. I do. I grew up with a very funny family that was very free to speak their minds and encouraged kids. In fact, I didn't get to sit at the grown-ups table till I could be funny enough to sit there. Swear to God, is the truth. Like, you can sit with the grown-ups when you can keep up with the conversation. Totally true. So I was like, well, I better step up my game then. I'm gonna get some jokes in. Because I want to play Scrabble with Fam. Some people were, just to close this out, hurt by sarcasm, or had parents or other people in their lives that were sarcastic to punish and abuse. So not to be too somber about it, but I challenge everybody that I talk to who wants to write and perform comedy to think about that, because it's very, very important to the creation of comedy in our culture. It's very prevalent, and if you have a lopsided or off take on sarcasm, or you're not practiced at it, is going to be very challenging for you to collaborate with other comedy writers and comedians and actually sell your comedy. It's not required, but it's important. So with that, I will close.